Welcome, friends, back to the Performance Mindset Show. I am your host, Amy Calandrino, Orlando commercial real estate broker and author of the book From Perfect to Real. This show is all about leveling up in business, real estate, leadership, and life. Each week, I bring you real conversations with top performers and mindset experts who are building big lives on their own terms. If you're ready to ditch perfection, trust your path, and grow with intention, you are in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and let's get into it. So, Yonah Weiss is business director at Madison Specs. Or do you usually say at SPEC? Or you just
we say Specs. Yeah, it's just the acronym. It's an acronym actually. So
just an acronym. So where he leads an engineering-based cost segregation studies that help real estate owners accelerate depreciation, reduce taxes, and improve cash flow. He's been featured on hundreds of real estate podcasts and is known for making complex tax concepts simple and practical for investors at every level. He's also founder of the CRE LinkedIn Challenge. It's a community-based series that's helped hundreds of CRE pros create real connections online. His work on IRS-compliant cost segregation is an engineering and accounting process recognized by the IRS to reclassify building components for accelerated depreciation with the goal of putting more money after cash back into investors' hands. Who does not want that? I want that. So,
of course.
Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I love the intro. It really, it allows people to be curious about, wait a second, how exactly am I doing that? And how am I saving money? Like, everyone knows taxes is the worst. Like, it's the worst and probably biggest expense that any individual or business owner has. So if you can figure out a way to legally pay less of it, that's what we're all about.
That's a win.
Huge.
That's a win. Yeah. I'm seeing nowadays right now insurance costs. And then, of course, your real estate property taxes, but otherwise your other taxes. It's great. So, well, we met through CREI Summit. And so big shout out to Ken Ashley. And I thought we could have a conversation today about demystifying cost segregation. Yeah. And then also share how maybe you've built a real community around it.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned the LinkedIn Challenge community that I created also. Have you ever participated in any of those? I don't remember if you were ever.
I have not.
You've not. We're actually starting one next Monday. If you want to get it. It might be too busy a time for you right now. But the point of it is essentially encouraging people to post consistently and engage on LinkedIn. And I've just been doing it, as fun, because I got so much out of LinkedIn and using social media that I just wanted to give back. So we've been doing this kind of accountability challenge. But the point I'm making here is community is what it's all about, right? Real estate is people business. So if you can join forces with more and more people, the more successful you're going to be.
Absolutely. We had some different things we needed to work out with a buyer I'm representing this morning. And I'm like, talk to this person. He said, oh yeah, I forgot. I know that person and I know that person. And it's the world becomes so much smaller when you have a community, and even complex challenges become so much more simple because the probability of you finding someone that's maybe dealt with the same thing that you have, the odds just go up drastically at that point.
For sure. Totally.
So for someone who's hearing cost segregation for the very first time, what's the plain English version of what you do and why does it matter?
So it's a weird name that is essentially accelerated depreciation, as you mentioned it earlier. Right? So anyone who owns a property besides your primary residence, whether it be commercial or residential, you're able to claim or take an income tax deduction called depreciation. Cost seg or cost segregation is just an advanced form of that depreciation. By breaking down the building into different components on an engineering perspective and showing how certain components depreciate on a faster or accelerated level, we're able to take bigger deductions during the earlier years of ownership. So essentially, I look at it as cost seg is a cash flow mechanism. Allows you to pull from that pool of potential deductions that you may never see. You may never take those. And instead of waiting, 39 years and taking a little bit every single year, we can take a big chunk in the first year or in the first few years.
Wow. And yeah, I noticed that you really need to do it within like the first 5 years. You don't or do you have to do it in your first 5 years, or you see the most benefit when you do it in your first 5 years?
You definitely see more benefit when you do it earlier on. Most people like to get it done in the first year. And the reason for that being, number one, is that it's actually setting up your taxes the correct way from the beginning, just breaking down the depreciation into different categories. Because believe it or not, the IRS says that doing a cost seg is actually the correct form of depreciating your property, right? You're supposed to break down things into a 5-year or 15-year and 7-year level instead of lumping everything together into that 39-year components, which the 39-year or 27.5 for residential is the structural components of the property. And that's always the majority of the value of any property, right? It's going to be in the structure.
Right.
And so it makes sense that, accountants just are, lazy or what have you, but they're just lumping it all together, putting on what we call straight line depreciation, where the whole building is run on this 39-year schedule. But like I said, the IRS actually says there's things inside your property like that depreciate on a 5-year level. And that's all the interior components that are non-essential to the structure. So think about things like appliances or furniture, equipment, but even like shelving, bookshelves, countertops, window treatments, fixtures, all kinds of things inside, even millwork and stuff like that goes on this 5-year schedule. So if we're able to identify what those are, we're going to put those on that 5-year schedule, take the value of those components, add it up, and take it as a deduction over that 5-year level. And so you mentioned is it best to do in the first 5 years? Well, the reason why is because the 5-year property, which, can be sometimes 20 to 30% of the value of the property, is depreciated over that 5-year period. So after 5 years has already passed, you've already kind of taken a lot of the depreciation. And so, there's not a lot to work with left, but you certainly can still do it at any point.
Yeah. So yeah, I personally, we had a building in 2019. I didn't do a cost seg on, and then we 1031 did the 2 buildings, but then one was like over $500,000, but then we put 100,000 into it, and everything that you're listing, I'm like, floors, millwork, appliances, window treatments. We did all those things, but we did not do cost seg. So, I think just even for myself personally, and then I lots of buyers that are purchasing properties, so I think you'll definitely be part of the toolkit, so to speak, and help them kind of level up. And well, we all know in commercial real estate though too, if you're like a resource and you're helping your clients cash flow better, then everybody wins.
That's what it's all about. A lot of people, especially investors, you rarely come across investors, although maybe you do as treating clients who are business owners, but real estate investors are always trying to buy more and more and more and more and scale. And so the best way to scale is have more cash available to you. Now, sure, if you have investors along with you and you have capital partners and things like that, you don't necessarily need a lot of your own cash, but nevertheless, the more cash, your business has, the more you can reinvest into that business. So it's definitely an important tool in your toolkit.
Yeah, that is on the list. And then yes, the LinkedIn challenge too. Well, that'll be on my January list once I make it through this quarter of transition.
Right. Yeah. No, we usually do it like once a quarter. And so it's been a lot of fun because literally, like, as you mentioned, hundreds of people have participated in this. And I've seen, I don't want to exaggerate, but literally lives change through participating in that. Business partnerships created, investors, a lot of business happens through just the networking that goes on through that. It's not, the main thing is not necessarily the teaching and encouraging people to post consistently, although that's really kind of the premise of it, but really it's more about this really close-knit networking that happens throughout this 10-day period, this 2-week period. So it's really, really powerful.
Well, let the record reflect, I am 100% in for Q1 2026. Once I get through the wonderful repapering of all my
Right.
deals and the wonderful I'm basically tearing down a house and building a new house, which is really it's great. It really is. It is really awesome. So, but I'm also one of those people, I move a million miles a minute. So then having to do all the minutia to get everything like set to then move forward, it just annoys me a little bit, but I totally understand what I have to do. So anyways, is there anything, so I know that we had a lot of changes to IRS guidance and, different changes. Was there anything different in 2025 that you talked to clients about and you wanted to point out?
There's a huge tax change that happened. We just passed the big, beautiful bill, which was basically reinstated a lot of the changes that came in the first tax bill that was done by Trump in the first term, which was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. And what one of the biggest things that did regarding real estate was introduce this new law called 100% bonus depreciation, right? Now, and so that was introduced in 2017. It phased out, meaning 100% bonus depreciation. I'll describe what that is in a second, but it phased out, meaning it was at 100% through 2022. 23 went down to 80%. 24, 60%, 25, 40%, but then it was reinstated now in 2025 back up to the 100%, and it's become permanent now. So it's no longer going to phase out. So what 100% bonus depreciation says is, right, we already talked about depreciation, right? Depreciation is that tax deduction, and you can break it down. But once you've done the cost seg study and shown how certain components depreciate faster, meaning on that 5-year schedule for all the personal property we discussed, there's a 15-year schedule, a category where that's including land improvements. So if you think about like if you have a parking lot or pavement, concrete, landscaping, signage, fencing, retaining walls, any of this stuff that's outside of the property that is, again, land improvements, that's on a 15-year schedule. All those 5 and 15-year depreciation, you have the option to take 100% of those deductions in the first year. So as opposed to just waiting respectively over that 5, take those extra deductions over a 5-year period or a 15-year period instead of, a little bit every year for 39 years. Now we get this huge supercharge of 100% bonus of taking all of those deductions up front. So just kind of to illustrate what that means, like in numbers, let's say buy $1 million property, okay? And your 39-year depreciation, had you not done a cost seg, would be about $20,000 a year, right? After you subtract a little bit for land, you divide that by 39. Round numbers, just keeping it simple, $20,000 depreciation deduction, which, by the way, depreciation in general is great because you automatically just get this write-off that you can reduce your taxable income from regardless. Okay, comes along costing and says, okay, let's say 20% of that $1 million is going to be 5-year property, which means we can now take, instead of $20,000 a year, in the first 5 years, we can take $200,000. So instead of a $20,000, we've just doubled that, right, or more than double that, right, to $50,000 a year or $40,000. So because there's the 39-year components that you're still going to get, but in addition to that, the 5-year property. So we're doubling or tripling, close to tripling our depreciation deduction just with cost seg, okay, in the first 5 years. Comes along bonus depreciation and says, well, wait a second, you have that 5-year property that's $200,000. You can take $200,000 deduction in the first year. So that's literally 10x because we're saying instead of the $20,000 deduction, we're in the first year getting a $200,000 deduction. And I'm being very conservative with the numbers. It can be more than that. It can be much greater. And obviously it goes up. The percentages may stay the same, but the value increases the greater the property. So you have a $10 million property. We're talking about a $2 million, $2 to $3 million tax deduction in the first year. Talk about cash flow, right? It's a game changer. So we talk about what's changed in the tax bill this year. The biggest game changer is that 100% bonus coming back.
Let me ask you this. So let's say an owner owns a building and they're renting it out and the tenant, it needs to do improvements. Depending on who does the improvements, either one of them can claim it, correct?
Correct, yeah. So whoever spends the money is going to be the one to be able to claim the depreciation. So if the tenant is actually doing the build out from their own money, even though they don't own the real estate, they still own the improvements and they can depreciate.
The leasehold improvements,
Exactly. The leasehold improvements, you can depreciate those as a tenant. So very powerful for a tenant as well. And as an owner, if you're doing the build out, it may be more advantageous to the owner to offer to do the build out because they're going to get the tax deductions from doing that. And so it's something to kind of think about in negotiations and playing with. Well,
strategically,
yeah. I mean, a lot of times I'm sure you come across this a lot where a builder, who's going to pay for the improvements, right? Who's going to own that? And maybe you can get more leverage of, the price of the actual sale if you can leverage the owner saying, hey, I'll put out the build out, and they're going to be able to write that off anyway. So it's like a win-win in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, it's powerful to have that information to go either way. Like, if a small business owner is getting started and they're like, they want to do all these things that maybe the landlord doesn't want to pay for. Well, you have bonus depreciation, then look at that. You're putting the money in there, but it's coming back. And alternatively, talking to the owner and educating them. It's interesting that it could go either way. So, is there do you have I know you do a million of these, right? Not million, but I've seen tens of thousands, obviously. Is there a favorite before and after that kind of stands out to you that you guys were able to deliver some incredible value?
When you have tens of thousands, it's hard to kind of single out one because there are so many. But the stories that really make the biggest impact on me are the times when they're like small business owners, like you're saying, or smaller investors who are, because we work with REITs and, big, these huge corporations and, they're doing a dozen of these a year or whatever. It's not, obviously, it's impactful, but for me, it's the individuals who their lives are actually changed for the better because they're able to, pay less taxes. Literally, I've seen people being able to retire one spouse because of the after-tax benefits of the cost seg by just being, in real estate. So it's, and, not to exaggerate, but there are people who are investing in real estate, and because of the depreciation benefits, you're able to get more after taxes than having two spouses work full-time jobs. So it's, that's the impact that I've seen. And one of the biggest things I years ago, I had a broker who was very successful residential real estate broker in California. And he was like the number one producer in his county for years, making 7 figures and paying, high 6 figures in taxes.
Oh, right? Yeah.
He was blown away when he learned about cost seg, and we had a conversation. He was an investor as well and had bought a property like a residential, apartment building. And it was like, hey, let's do cost seg. He was literally paying I don't remember, I think it was like $300,000-$400,000 in income tax bill, right? We did the cost seg, and he paid 0 income tax on his property because he was able to reduce his taxable income literally to 0 just by doing a cost seg on a couple properties. And so it was like, you talk about the impact that has on a person. Wow. Like, okay, if I can now have an extra $300,000-$400,000 of cash in my bank account, what am I going to do with that? Well, an investor knows what they're going to do. They're probably buying another property, right? And being able to make more money from that, it's just incredible.
That makes me think about, I recently had on my podcast, Nick Jones, who is, in Orlando terms, he's pretty well known. He's got a $75 million portfolio, but that's pretty good. I mean, he's just started in the last 5 years, and he has a number of different kind of assets, but he talks a lot about the overall long-term game of commercial real estate and the momentum. And it seems to me, when you are deploying a tool like this, that you're building that momentum, and it really is a lot about momentum.
Yeah, it's momentum. And real estate is, you ask the people who have been in this business for a couple decades or more, you see that they're talking about it's a long-term game, and it's the greatest builder of wealth that you have, but you're really building that wealth over a long period of time. So if you can scale faster in the early time and build that momentum, like you're saying, then you'll be able to create that wealth and just help keep building on that over the years, more and more and more. So you're absolutely right.
so I was just thinking, and obviously the IRS has specific rules for cost segregation studies, and you all have done like tens of thousands of this. What corners, like if an investor's like, oh, I want to do a cost seg, study, what corners should they never cut when it kind of comes to that?
You should never cut any corners when you're dealing with taxes. Yeah, you don't want to cut corners at all. But I mean, I have seen some people try to cut corners. Like, for example, like you said, the IRS has very specific guidelines. There's a publication in the IRS's website you can look at. It's called the Cost Segregation Audit Techniques Guide. It's like 400 pages of very detailed rules going into how it needs to be done with the engineering aspects and all the different, et cetera. There have been, over the past few years, with the onset of AI and these great, obviously, tools that are in technology, people trying to create some of these, or not trying to, created some of these online kind of software cost segs where they're using AI and they're using just software without the actual engineering component of it, which is kind of missing the guidelines of the IRS. So that's the corner cutting that I have seen. I've seen people who are on smaller level, smaller investors, really geared towards people who just in residential and people who have kind of small properties where it doesn't make sense to spend a few $1,000s on a cost seg. They just want to spend a few $100 because, hey, I just bought a house for like $70,000. I'm not going to spend, whatever to spend. So for those people, that's who it's marketed to. And again, cutting corners, because if a person is ever audited, it will be thrown out. Like it won't pass an audit, right? But it's in a sense no better than just having your accountant say, we're not going to do cost seg. I'm just going to say, okay, 20% is going to go towards the 5-year property.
Kind of like almost like mileage. And you're like, I put 11,000 miles on my car. I probably 68% of it this year was business.
Right. Exactly. There are some like kind of rules of thumb, right?
But you might be looking behind your shoulder and you don't have anything to substantiate it. But on that size transaction, if something came back, it's not like the end of the world versus you bought a $5 million apartment building and you're the GP with LPs and you decide to, play around with a brand new online tool and not do the engineering component. That's much more higher stakes.
Exactly. Exactly. And so there is a concept of kind of using a rule of thumb kind of measure guesstimates or whatever estimates. And some accountants will do this and they'll say, hey, I'm fine just putting, 10% or 20% or whatever. And if it ever comes back, I actually heard an accountant, a very good guy, a friend of mine. He was like, listen, if the IRS ever comes back and audits me, I'm going to be like, what? You think that like 5% isn't going to go towards the land improvements? Like, for sure, 5% is the value. The land improvements, right, is worth like 5% of the property. So what's the big deal that I'm just putting 5% and not actually showing the list of what the value of those things are? So he had it was kind of a logical argument he was making. I don't know if he ever used that in an actual audit, but the point is there is such a concept where a lot of accountants will be comfortable using somewhat of a rule of thumb. In my opinion, that is cutting corners, but there may be room for that in certain examples, certain instances.
Well, this seems to me it's like more of an insurance policy that that it's done correctly, and then again, you're not looking over your shoulder or your rearview mirror or whatever the cliche is.
To a certain extent, yeah, it is.
What's one tax myth that you wish would disappear forever?
Ooh, a tax myth. I'll give two. There's number one, just regarding cost seg. There's a lot of myths, and I've actually written articles on about the different misconceptions and myths surrounding cost seg. But one of the biggest ones is how expensive it is, right? And one of the reasons why people think it's expensive is because it used to be extremely expensive. Like 10, 20 years ago when it was first starting out, it was, like $20,000, $30,000 to get one of these done because it was only like KPMG and it was only like the big four accounting firms that were doing it in the first place. And so it was a very kind of niche still, and it wasn't to the masses yet. So nowadays it's become extremely affordable, but there's still like this, I remember there's like this, if you Google, I don't know if it's still up there, but I remember a few years ago I tried this. If you Google like cost seg, now there's so many companies that it probably won't come up, but there was this Journal of Accountancy article written in like 2005. And in there, it says, costings may not be everyone because it could cost, $20,000 to $30,000 to get one of these things done. So that's still floating around there in the ether. And I've seen people like literally copy and paste that into like blog posts. And yeah, but I saw that several times. And so it was like, that's one of the biggest myths, I think, because we were like, why am I going to spend so much? It doesn't make sense. So it really can be like $3,000 to $5,000, right, to get a costing done nowadays, which makes a lot more sense for smaller investors.
Right. It's like the cost of like an appraisal or your phase one.
Exactly.
And it's just part of what you would end up spending. And it's reasonable to the overall acquisition cost.
Absolutely. So that's one big myth that I always like to kind of misconception that I like to do away with. The other one is that people think, making a lot of money means you have to pay a lot of taxes, right? And it's like almost like people almost like pat themselves on the back and like, oh yeah, I pay a lot of income tax. That just means I'm making a lot of money, right?
Right.
That's really silly if you think about it, because there are so many legal ways to reduce, deduct, defer, all different tax strategies that you can use to help pay as little tax as possible. And, cost seg is obviously probably one of the biggest ones out there. So that's another big myth that I'd like to get rid of.
Wow. Yeah. So you've done tens of thousands of cost segs. You've also done hundreds of podcasts. So my question to you would be, is there any single conversation that kind of stands out to you that you've had, or a great like experience that you have overall had over the years doing these?
I love podcasts. Obviously, I've been a guest on 500 podcasts. I've been a host, and my Weiss Advice podcast has been a host in close to 500 guests as well. So, altogether, the past 5 years or so, we've done quite a lot. But I love doing the in-person ones. I've only done it a handful of times. Obviously, most of them, done through Zoom or other apps that are doing this like we're doing now. I love it regardless because the conversations are great. The idea of podcasting and what it does for content creation has just been a huge game changer in my business, in of itself. Absolutely. And that's why I really doubled down on it so early on and have just continued with it. But the in-person ones, the experiences of doing that are just amazing. So I do want to share one experience that I had, which was probably, like you said, the one that probably stands out the most, is I flew to Denver a few years ago to do a podcast for one of like the side channels of Bigger Pockets. It was a side podcast channel. It's called Multifamily Mentors. And we did a 2-part series there, where the first one was in the studio, 2 hosts. Both of them are actually clients of mine that do cost seg. And we did, this great conversation and went up on YouTube, got like over 100,000, 200,000 views. So I don't remember exactly. And then the second part was we actually went out to one of the hosts' apartment buildings that he had bought recently in Denver Metro. Okay. It was like a 200-unit apartment complex. And we went and we did a walkthrough showing like all the things that, we're going to depreciate with cost seg, inside and outside. And it was just a lot of fun because I had never really been able to showcase that aspect of it. We talk about this stuff. We're pointing out, and they had some great, kind of things going on with the graphics, like, pointing out this and numbers coming up on the screen and things like that. So it was a lot of fun.
I have a dream of eventually getting like an on the road kind of setup. I think would be so much fun. And I don't know if you have seen it, but because I've only done maybe like a half dozen episodes so far this year, and I'm on a weekly cadence. So maybe it happens like every other month, but I now have an in-person studio.
Oh, cool.
And I will tell you, getting to like sit there and offer the water, we get settled in, and it's just I feel like I'm in a living room. Like I literally set up this little sitting area. I moved into my house last year in December, and what sold me on the house, I saw this little sitting area, and I'm like, that is going to be an amazing little podcast area, like right off. I'm at my home office now. This is so obviously cool. Not Cushman and Wakefield.
That's great.
Which would be very plain and very white, but in the other room. But no, I would agree with you. When you can get to do an in-person podcast, I think it's really like a powerful like tool, and you build like so much better, like it's just deeper connections, just like when we get together at like CREI and otherwise. So yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you I'm going to, of course, ask you a few like rapid fire fun kind of
Sure.
questions, and then a question I just started asking everybody that I may or may not know I asked, and I didn't really kind of give you any advance warning on it. But was there anything else you wanted to chat about before we transition to that?
I would say, just in terms of the cost seg, there's so much out there, there's so much to learn. And I think the main thing is for a lot of investors or business owners, we assume that our CPA, when it comes to taxes, our CPA is taking care of it. And that's unfortunately not true. More times than not, many more times than not, CPAs are not telling their clients about this and not being proactive.
Yeah.
And so if you are a business owner or you're an investor, you need to do your own research. You need to reach out, find out of the cost seg, if it's good for you. And that's all I'm saying. Educate yourself. Don't assume when it comes to taxes that your CPA is being proactive to tell you about everything.
And I would say someone who works with a lot of business owners, investors, you want to have also like a CPA that's open to all those kinds of things, and that also is super communicative with you. Like I physically meet with speaking of meeting physically, like with my CPA at least like a couple times a year, just like to catch up. Our clients are very similar, and we're just making sure everything's going great across, my family's different organizations, because we have multiple entities and 1065s, 1120s, 990s, all the fun things. But yeah, so I think your CPA should have like a growth mindset and be like, hey, I totally trust you, but I want to, I just heard about this and just want to make sure we're on this. I just acquired this property, and just making sure to bring more information to them, and then hopefully by you bringing that to the attention of your CPA, then they can help other people. All right. So if someone gave you $1 million and said you cannot invest in real estate, what would you do with it?
Cannot invest in real estate. Wow. Well, first of all, if someone just gave me $1 million, I would probably give at least half back, at least half, but probably more to different organizations, charities that I help out with. I'm pretty much doing that with my own income anyways. So, if I'm just getting extra, I would just double down on that. If I had to invest it in something, I would probably actually maybe buy a business or something. Just, for the fun of it.
Any idea what business it would be?
No. I mean, not really. Maybe like, something probably simple that could be very passive or as passive as possible, whether it be, maybe vending machines or, something like that. Not a business that I would need to necessarily be full-time and run.
Something more passive.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've seen a lot more. Yeah. Like ice machines, vending machines, all kinds of really cool stuff. Okay. So my other question would be, who are 3 under the radar voices in commercial real estate you think more people should follow?
Ooh. Well, I don't know what under the radar means, because with social media, everyone is like everyone who's on social media, which is everyone that I know pretty much, is out there to begin with. But if I had to kind of pick people who maybe not, as known, I really like this kid. You probably met him. Oh, you for sure met him at the CREI, Gabe Einhorn. Really cool kid. Yeah, he actually came to visit me in my office about 6 months ago. Really special guy. Young kid, 22, 23, getting a start out, does commercial mortgages as a day job, and has a couple of startups on the side. One being like a clothing brand, which is like a very powerful, like God oriented and religious, oriented like clothing brand, where he has like verses from the Bible like on the sweatshirts and things like that. So pretty cool. And yeah, he's got a great voice, kind of showing what it's like being like a young startup founder.
I love Gabe Einhorn. Maybe I'll just make this question like, who's one up and comer that we all need to like follow, and then we will I'll make sure my show note editor like shows him. He's definitely on Twitter. I had the opportunity when I was at CREI I got invited to go like hike a mountain with Gabe and Corey Zelnick and James. I was the only person in New York. I kind of feel like they're trying to tell me something. I need to go to New York, but he's very positive. And I also feel like he doesn't show fear. And so I think fear or inaction keeps you from getting to your goals, but he will just go do what he thinks is the next thing to do to get to his goals. And that's a recipe for success. I read, I put something in my phone the other day, as a quote, I'm going to do it anyways. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm scared to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. Awesome. You just do it anyways. Yeah. So, but yeah, I love that.
For sure. So you wanted 3. I don't know. Should I still give you 2 more or we're...
You can give me 2 more. Yeah.
But
give me 2 more. I like that you're all over the, you might have some people I haven't thought about.
I like your, the kind of, little twist that you put on it, which is maybe not under the radar, but maybe kind of up and comers, because I think there are a lot of people out there who are kind of up and coming, who may be, not known a lot out there yet. I don't know. Maybe you'll think about it, but, who else do I really like that's up and coming or is under the radar? There's a young woman in Louisville who I've become acquainted with through LinkedIn. She's actually a guest on my podcast recently as well. Her name is Julia Anderson.
Okay.
She's a marketer for real estate. Like her focus is marketing. She's, been in the business for not too long, maybe like 5, 6, 7 years, something like that, but really making an impact, and sharing a lot on social about marketing and about how to do it right. And, not just I think she works with like syndicators, but also with, real estate investors and owners and business owners and things like that. I think she started out as, working as marketing for like a local restaurant, and then kind of transitioned into real estate through that somehow. So yeah, that's just another person I would mention there. And then who else should we talk about?
You know who the third person I would say is, and they're not as much under the radar anymore, but they're still fresh to the CRE scene, would be Fly.
Fly's awesome. Yeah, I was thinking Fly. She's awesome.
Yeah, I think we were on the same wavelength because I was like, she's like almost like my soul sister now at this point, because we did program co-chairing for CREI and we were basically like attached to the hip like for 9 months together. But before CREI, I didn't know who she was. I don't know if you heard the story that she cold called me, and it was during my 6-month period of time where I was like homeschooling my children. And so while still working, and I'm like, okay, I don't know who you are, but like send me like a text and we'll talk about this later.
Yeah.
And now we're really good friends.
I know. That series was amazing. Actually, that's how I found her also, is that she had cold called Aviva Sunrise. And I'm connected with Aviva for years, and I saw this, like Aviva posted about it, like, who's this woman that's like cold calling people and filming it? And it was really cool. It was cute. And so I connected with her through that. And then not this past year, but the last year's CRE summit, that we met in person for the first time. And she did we did this kind of cool thing where she like cold called me. And then as she was on the phone with me, like I actually walked up there, like, in person. Like,
I didn't see that. I'll have to find
it was funny.
That.
It was like kind of like, hey, here I am. Wait, I'm on the phone with you. What are you doing? But I'm gonna actually, I'll tell a third person, not because she's necessarily under the radar, this woman, but because it's a little bit off the beaten path of the commercial real estate. And I know we're, this podcast, not just for real estate, and I think is really important part of, for a lot of people's businesses, is this woman. She's not on the radar at all, but for the commercial real estate world, she probably is. And she's, her name's Avery Carl, Carl, and she runs the biggest short-term rental brokerage in the country. It's called the Short Term Shop. And, they work in a dozen different markets around the country, vacation rental markets specifically. And she and her husband are investors. They own a dozen properties, and they teach people, not only do they sell like thousands of these properties, but they teach people how to buy and self-manage remotely, self-manage short-term rentals. So I've seen people, and it's really, really powerful because a lot of people, think about real estate investing and it's so, there's so much time and effort, and people, maybe buy a single family rental, but the short-term rentals are so powerful because there's this added layer of the cost seg and the tax strategies that come along with it. But people do it and can still work full time, and spend. Some of the investors I work with, they've told me they spend literally, like, once they get it set up, which is a tedious process a little bit.
It is.
But once you get it set up, they spend about a half an hour to an hour a week managing their property. And so that's the only problem with that is they don't know which half an hour, right? Because
they're like, I need to do this, and then
because the hour spent is usually when there's like some urgent thing that comes up from one of the people. So it's like, I don't spend a lot of time, but I have no idea when that call is going to come in.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed continuing to get to know you better. I think this is really valuable information for anyone, whether they even just have a few like short-term rentals or single family rentals or commercial real estate. I think this information is tremendous, even for myself personally and for my clients. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. So what is the best way for people to reach out to you? I assume it's LinkedIn, but I don't want to be presumptive either.
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn or, X or Instagram, all those places. One thing I would say, though, don't just hit that follow button. Take 10 seconds and write a little message. Hit the connect, write a message and say, let me know that you heard me on Amy's podcast, and we'll connect that way.
And don't immediately send a Calendly link. How many LinkedIn messages do you get every day? It's like, I can't wait to start our synchronistic relationship together. We have so much in common. Book a time on my calendar.
Yeah.
No. What's that called? You've been pitch slapped is what Mo calls it. Yeah. No. Just say, hey, I heard you. I'd like to get to know you better. Let's stay connected.
For sure.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, I want to thank all my listeners for hearing another episode of the Performance Mindset Show. If today's episode gave you something to think about, share it and subscribe so you don't miss out on what's next. Want to go deeper? Grab my book, From Perfect to Real. It's all about dropping perfection and thriving your way. You can also connect with me at amycalandrino.com. Until next time, stay grounded, stay growing, and keep showing up for you. This is Amy Calandrino, signing off.